Hi everyone, Brenna Kantner here with Nexus Youth and Family Services. We are going to chat today about how to prioritize your mental health as a parent. So feeling burned out as a parent, no, you're not alone. It's a tough job. So parenthood is obviously full of joy, which we see in pictures we take and share online and those milestones and birthdays and things like that. But what we don't talk about is that parental burnout, and there's oftentimes some weird guilt associated with it, judgment from other people. If you say you're feeling burned out, what that response might be. And so it tends to get overshadowed and not talked about. And so I'm here to talk about it because you're not alone if you're feeling it. So one study from last year by Ohio State University found that 66% of working parents reported feeling burned out. And so, like all parents, whether you work outside of the home or not, are at risk for burnout. It's when you're stressed and exhausted and kind of overwhelmed, and it's hard to implement those natural coping skills, and it can have an impact on the whole family. So I want to differentiate here. So I'm going to talk kind of about two things because we have prioritizing parental mental health. And I think it's also in that is important to talk about parents who already have like a diagnosed mental illness, whether it's, anxiety, depression, or something more than that. And so overall, we're talking about how parents' mental health is impactful to children. And I kind of just want to differentiate those two things. Just because you're having a bad day doesn't mean you have depression, or if you're stressed out for a couple days, it doesn't mean you have a diagnosable condition. But I wanted to kind of differentiate those two because we're kind of going to be talking about both. So, parenting is rewarding and daunting, and it poses challenges, right? In general, and it can be impactful to mental health. And for those who already have a mental health condition, right? So the effect of a parent's mental health or mental illness on children is varied, and it's super unpredictable because there's risk factors and there's protective factors, which we'll talk about both of those things. And ultimately, a parent's mental health does impact children. Biological, psychosocial, environmental, but not all children will be negatively affected or even affected in the same way. So it's important to kind of have this part of the conversation as well. So it should be no surprise that there's a trickle-down effect between a parent's mental health and the impact on kids. So there's lots of studies that have documented how parents' mental health influences children. One study found that children who have a parent with poor mental health were more likely to have poor health overall, more likely to be exposed to violence in the home, and experience like mental, emotional struggles, among other outcomes, maybe struggling in school, things like that. So we want to talk about what impact does it have. So number one, the fact that a parent has a mental illness or a mental health condition alone is not sufficient to cause problems for the child and family, because ultimately it's all about how it's dealt with, how it's managed, how the parent's behavior is impacted by that mental health, and how family relationships are handled, right? So children that have, so let's talk about risk factors, right? So like poverty, occupational issues. So like if we're unemployed, marital difficulties, a poor parent-child relationship, a co-occurring substance use disorder, along with a mental health condition, domestic violence, right? Those are the things that paired with mental health are going to potentially impact your child more than a mental health condition alone. Right. And so again, when we're talking about prioritizing a parent's mental health, it's kind of like that, what they say in airplanes, right? You can't like put on your own air mask for oxygen first. If you're not taking care of yourself as a parent, it's going to be really hard to be the parent you want to be, for everyone around you, or partner or whatever, right? So that piece of, we have to fill our own cups, and we have to have our own our own mental wellness in order to be the best we can for other people. And it's hard to prioritize that because sometimes, right, again, that judgment, societal perception, we feel like putting ourselves first is not the way we're supposed to do things, but it is. It makes you better, right? And so that's why we're having this conversation today. So my goal here is to talk about that like prevention perspective. So preventative interventions are aimed at addressing those risk factors that we talked about and increasing a child's protective factor. That's what increases resiliency in children. And resilient children understand that they are not responsible for their parents' difficulties, and they're able to move forward and face life's challenges. And it's not, they don't have like the weight of the world of like worrying about their parents' unemployment kind of thing. So we're talking resiliency here. Protective factors, right? They include a warm parent-child relationship, a support system, whether that is family or friends, but that natural support system. And, you know, if you don't have a lot of family, do you have friends, and do you have connection? A sense of love and belonging, positive self-esteem, positive coping skills, that they're successful at school, a parent being employed, that's a protective factor. Connection with other adults outside of the home, like that they have a good relationship with a teacher, for example, or a coach if they're in sports, things like that. So when we're talking about risk factors and protective factors, right, we're looking at kind of balancing that out and looking at leaning towards the preventative piece of things, and building resiliency in our children. And doing so, right, again, we're really focusing on like our mental health, like parents' mental health, because that is a huge aspect of our children's resiliency. So in light, kind of going along with that preventative piece, I'm going to talk about some strategies to support your mental health. I have 7 of them. There's probably more, but I'm going to talk about 7 strategies to support your mental health. So number 1, taking a few minutes for yourself every day, carving a little time to unwind. I get it. It's easier said than done. But it is key to supporting your overall wellness and well-being. And like I said, put on your own oxygen mask first. So if you're taking that few minutes for yourself every day, whether it's waking up before your kids do and having a cup of coffee, sitting outside for a minute after kids go to bed, whether it's communicating with your partner and saying like, I need a minute, right? So it's important to take this time. Sometimes, right, like a quiet shower alone without interruption is what we want, and that's what that can happen, right? So it doesn't have to be this like grandiose thing. It's finding those few minutes kind of in the everyday life to make some time for your own well-being. Number 2 is pausing and checking in with yourself every day. So those brief moments of self-reflection can help you better understand like what's going on with you, what areas you may need to pay attention to, and what you need to thrive. What is it that you need to feel whole and not burned out, right? Sometimes this can be self-care. This can be really like professional help if that's what, right? Like there's this balance of like, do I need 5 minutes alone, or do I need some support, more support, right? Don't wait to seek help. Excuse me. Knowing when you need help right? And that comes from doing these other two things, self-reflection, like knowing when you need help and asking for it are signs of strength and wisdom, and are not something to be feared, right? Like we want you to ask for help. Whether it's behavioral health services, right? That can help parents deal with mental health conditions like anxiety, depression, people that are dealing with burnout or struggling with stress, right? There's so many resources, and after COVID, right, we have a huge increase in support in telehealth, right? So again, right, taking that time for yourself to slow down, recognize when you need help, because like it's accessible, it's there. Number 4 is being mindful of what you commit to. As a parent, right, we want to do it all. We want to do all the things. We want to sign kids up for all the things after school, enrichment, extracurricular, all of that stuff. But, doing overtime, so you're, focusing on your career, keeping the house up, doing all the laundry, right? It's wild, but saying yes to too much, it's like the ticket to burnout. So, my husband was teasing me the other day that it takes me 45 minutes to get ready for bed because I always like fold laundry. That I brush my teeth and whatever, and then I fold a load of laundry. That's right. That's my time that I'm like, oh, I need to do this so I can switch laundry, right? But sometimes it's like you're tired and you want to go to bed, and like it's okay not to fold that load of laundry, and it's okay to say no, and it's okay to do takeout for dinner, and right, like you can do things that you can pull back and say what has to happen today, because kind of that concept of your plate being too full, right? Like something starts to spill over, and unfortunately, usually it's us, right? Like we're the first thing to go because as parents, you're so worried about taking care of everyone else around you. And self-care is usually the first thing to fall off that plate when it gets overwhelmed, and it should be the last thing. So spending meaningful time with your family every day is the next strategy. Right? Like that quality time with your children, whether it's 5 minutes sitting at the table coloring, going outside to play for 15 minutes, right? Like what does it look like? And it can vary for each family. But quality time is about being present, like not on your phone, not worried about work or the next thing or cooking dinner, right? It's really about slowing down and having that really intentional, like special time with your family, with your kids. Whether it's a movie night or, right, like it can be 5 minutes, it can be a few hours. But again, it's like, what does that look like and what works for your family? And know that it varies for each family. All right, number 6, don't take behavior personally. When I think of this, I'm kind of thinking more towards that preteen and adolescent stuff, but it can be across the lifespan. Right? Don't take your kids' behavior personally. Like, why don't they listen to me? Why are they being disrespectful? Why are they so moody? Sometimes our kids' behavior can be a source of conflict and stress for parents, and can be helpful to remember that a lot of these behaviors are developmentally appropriate. And I know that that's so hard to kind of process, but like a lot of it is it's developmentally appropriate, right? Whether your kid is 2 or 16, those behaviors, like most of the time, developmentally appropriate. So it's kind of that mantra for you to have of like, instead of taking it personally, kind of taking that step back and saying like, this is developmentally appropriate, right? Because that gives you a whole different mindset when we're thinking about like those automatic negative thoughts that come through our mind, going like, oh, right, and taking it personally is very different. Than it has a much different take to like, this is developmentally appropriate. This is not about me. right? So it's a different mindset. Number 7, scheduling regular time to talk to your spouse, your partner, someone close to you. Communication and connection with your partner can frequently center on like household management and like, who's picking, kid up from school and taking him to soccer, or what's happening this weekend, or right, like it's typically on managing things as opposed to like thoughts and feelings and just checking in and staying connected. So again, these things are all about intention, and doing things with intention as opposed to kind of getting stuck in that mundane, like every day, like, okay, well, went to work, home, have to do dinner, gotta get the kids to bed, gonna watch a TV show. Oh, talking to my spouse, like, hey, can you pick up Johnny from school tomorrow and take him to soccer, right? It just tends to like get into that I don't know, I don't want to say like comfortability, but that's kind of where my mind is going, right? That you're kind of getting into that just like day to day and kind of complacent conversations. And so doing things with intention, and scheduling time to have conversations with your partner, with your kids, all of those things. All of these strategies are about intention. So kind of keep that in mind. So some really great resources for you. First up, there is a whole page on Mental Health America. It's one of my favorite resources, honestly. They have webinars. There's so much on that page as a resource that it's so good. But specifically this page, there is a mental health resources for parents, and it talks about everything from like mental health and the single parent to bullying tips for parents, parenting in school, parenting in the military, parenting while caring for an aging parent, right? That sandwich. And there's sections, like each of these are a section with like multiple resources under them, pregnancy and postpartum, right? It's such a good resource. So check it out. I found stuff on there that I was like, oh, this is super helpful, because I am in the phase of parenting while caring for an aging parent. That's where I'm at. And some of those resources, if nothing else, right, like they feel validating because you're not alone. And you can feel that overwhelm. But sometimes when you can take that step back and know that you're not alone, as evidenced by all this research and all of these resources, right? Like knowing you're not alone in and of itself can just feel really validating. So, and again, like knowing you're not alone, right? Like you can logically know like other people are probably dealing with this, but like reading an article or watching a webinar or doing a worksheet, right? Truly seeing that you're not alone can, again, feel really validating. Another thing that Mental Health America has is a ton of different worksheets on a variety of different subjects. I linked the one here to prioritizing self-care and put a little screenshot, right, that you're kind of working through, like what are some things that would make you feel better but you can't like seem to do, whether it's finding the time, whatever, your thoughts, your expectations, how to set expectations differently, right? So I put that worksheet on here. But again, there are a ton of worksheets available for all ages too, which is really cool. Mental Health America also has a mental health quiz, and a ton of resources around that as well, whether it's connecting you with support, giving you resources based on, right, like there's quizzes regarding anxiety and depression and things like that. So it's just a good resource. And then locally, finding connection in your community is a resource in and of itself, right? So like First 5 Amador, if you follow them on Facebook, they have so many different events on a weekly basis. They have almost every day of the week, I think every day except Mondays, they have a play group from one's in Jackson, one's in Plymouth, and then one in Ione on different days. I think the Jackson one's Tuesday, and then the other ones, I'm not sure exactly which days those are, but it's Monday or Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. And then Fridays, they have messy mornings in Jackson, and it's always like a different theme kind of learning activity that's like sensory and all these stuff. So they have an inside space and this amazing outside space. But again, it's like your kids can find connection and you can meet other parents. There's a ton of Facebook groups, again, especially locally. There's like the Mothers Club of Amador County, right? Like there's all of these different Facebook groups. And events and things like that. So finding connection and things like First 5 Amador, right? If you go to the Jackson group every Tuesday, like you're going to see a lot of the same people and start making connection and connect with people with kids your same age. And like they have a ton of events. They have ones for parenting in the evenings and things like that too. So again, finding connection in your community, validate, find support, all of those things, right? Like it's available to you. And then professional support, we have Amador County Behavioral Health. We have Nexus Youth and Family Services that we have everything from individual counseling for youth that have been exposed to trauma. We have parenting education. There's community centers. There's senior socials. We have connections to the food bank and food distribution if your family is food insecure, right? So like all of these resources. Grow Therapy is an online platform that accepts most insurance, but you can get connected with it on telehealth or in-person therapy. Again, usually through your insurance, you go on and enter all your information, and if there's a copay, then there's a copay, right? It's really great. And then Psychology Today is a kind of an online directory of therapists, and you can filter it down by location, specialty, insurance, all of those things. So again, if you're looking for professional support, there are some resources locally and just to find stuff too. So like Grow Therapy and Psychology Today are kind of more search engines. So thank you so much for joining us. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, topics for future mental health and wellness workshops, please let us know. Follow us on YouTube and Facebook. We have, again, like our agency has a ton. We just had a mental health event in May that was super great. Had yoga in the park and a barbecue and things like that. So we often are posting about events and community resources. We post these mental health and wellness presentations and so much more. So, follow us on YouTube and Facebook, and we'll see you next time. You take care.